Welcome, Keller Williams family, Greater Heartland region. My name is Clark Kendall. I am excited to wrap up second to last session for Ignite 2022. And so however you're joining us today, whether you're watching live with your market centers or live on your own, either on Facebook or YouTube, or you might have happened to come across this on a YouTube search at a later point. I'm glad you're here. And so ready for us to lean in on this all important topic of getting to the close, focusing on the transaction, those service standards, give you some tips and tricks along the way. So if you've been on this Ignite journey with us, you know there's a participant guide. And so if you don't have that participant guide handy, go to ignite.ghregion.com. That's ignite.ghregion.com. Click on join in as a participant. Okay, there's going to be a link for a PDF that is every single one of the 20 sessions in one PDF. We're on session 19 today, so go to page 19.1 and we'll be ready to get going here. All right, so let me flip over to the slides here as we are on Ignite session 19, and I'm going to switch this up a little. Oh, we're good there. So yes, we're on get to close, second to last session. Right? So we've been on a long journey together, not only learning best practices about how to begin your value proposition and who you are as a realtor and what you bring to the table, and all the way to lead generation and lead follow-up. And now actually the transaction, how to serve it well, how to serve buyers and sellers well. Now we're getting to the details of how to work through the transaction, making sure that nothing falls through the cracks here today, right? So, because this is all about a successful close, right? Because it's true that not all deals actually make it to the close, right? If you're brand new in the real estate and you didn't know that, right? Welcome. And that's just a reality, right? We have to accept that some of the deals aren't going to close. And yet we're going to have all of our due diligence, all of our ducks in a row to make sure that the process is successful for our client, right? It all begins with mindset. And that's where we're going to begin here, right? So if you remember the 6 core competencies earlier, the 6 core competencies, the 5th one is coordinate the sell to closing. This is the session specifically on that. All right. So we're excited about this. And it's something that needs to be taken very seriously. So here's our agenda for today. All right, in our last session, we covered negotiation techniques. And before that, we talked about making and receiving offers. All right, so now we're going to move on to the rest of the transaction, remembering, again, those successful negotiation points, because these are going to be necessary throughout this transaction as well. So today, we're going to develop transaction timelines. Number 2, we're going to apply best practices to avoid risks. And thirdly, we're going to identify ways to follow up after closing to build our success. All right, so let's get cranking here. Quote from the MREA, right? We've got a lot of good quotes that are applicable to our topics, and this one is definitely fits within that stream. All right, so here is our quote. Real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It's a strenuous and trying time that requires all the attention and effort you can command. All right. They're not all trouble-free, right? Actually, I've yet to know one that did not have its own bumps or bruises that we might collect along the way, and that's just part of it, right? So we're going to make sure that by the time of this, you know what to do to get clients what they need, and so you as the agent can get paid, right? That's our goal today. All right, so we're going to begin today on timelines. All right, we're going to start there in timeline. So make sure you got your participant guide, follow along. We're kicking it in gear here now. So no, just as getting a lead, right, doesn't make the person your client. Getting a home or a client under contract doesn't mean you're getting paid or they're going to get to where they want to go, right? So there's several steps in this process where deal can fall apart, right? And so knowing how to manage the risks will help you take a contract all the way to the closing table, right? So ask those you all that are in the market center, right? If you're there, raise your hand. And if you're watching here, who has bought or sold a home? Outside of being an agent, who's bought or sold a home, right? I mean, let's not make the assumption. We have some amazing aspiring young agents that have yet to buy their first home, right? So think, what did you have to, as you were buying or selling that home, right? What did you have to do after you signed the contract as a consumer? Reach back in the memory files there. What did you have to do as a consumer or that client? Think about it. Okay, so a lot of people work together to make that closing happen. You had your own responsibilities and things and ways to respond, decisions to make, right? And now, as a realtor, you and your co-op, that agent on the other side, you're conductors, right? And you coordinate all the people and tasks that occur between the contract and closing. Now, it's likely also to be, especially your first few transactions, it's going to be high stress. Well, I should say, take a step back. It'll be high stress for your clients, but also if your initial ones, right? You got to be careful and realize that you can allow it to be an overly stressful situation for you. And that's what the whole topic today is. Let's not make this stress. Let's allow it to be all bless for you, right? So it's all about communication with the client, just as we talked about communication when the buyer, when the seller, work with the buyer, work with the seller. Right. So all communication is going to be key through all this. That's why, again, go back to those wonderful Y4C2Ts. Right. Communication is absolutely one of those components of that. All right. So let's get to deadlines. Whoops. Sorry. I just jumped in there a little bit. Deadlines and contracts. All right. So, knowing this is going to be a little bit tricky part, just as we've introduced some contracts or mentioned contracts in previous sessions, whether it's a buyer agency or listing agreement, right? So know that some of these will fit generally in the market, and it's a general deadlines that we're going to talk about. As always, go back and talk with your broker about these, but there are going to be some very, very common deadlines for the transaction. All right. So turn to the timelines page, your participant guide here. All right. So here's what we're going to kind of walk through here. All right. You're going to, throughout this session, right, you're going to kind of be drafting multiple timelines, like contract deadlines, buyer timelines, seller side timelines. But first, we want to just put a note in here that on your sales contract, that's kind of one of your guiding points, unless you have addendums or other supplemental documents for the sales contract, right? You're going to want to focus on those deadlines there. The majority of them are there, maybe not all of them, but the majority of them will be. So if you have your sample contract handy, right, that we used in those a couple other previous sessions, the first thing you want to do is get that contract out and plot out the different deadlines that relate to that contract, right? So if you've got an earnest money deadline, if you have, the inspection resolution deadline, all those things, right, on your sales contract, and they might be called different things, different markets, make sure those deadlines that are in the sales contract and any addendums, the supplemental documents, contracts are on your timeline, right? So you use the middle timeline in your guide there to kind of plot out the contract related deadlines in your participant guide there. And so you'll leave space above and below for additional activities. All right. So know that this is going to be something we're going to revisit throughout. You're going to work on later today. So for now, let's just start with making a note here to get your contract out. And obviously I can't go through your contract with you, but make a note here that what contracts are in there and put those on that middle section there. All right. Now, again, so this is going to be a little bit of homework. We're not going to be able to take time to do this for everybody or go through this, but make a note here, right? How many, and ask yourselves amongst your market center there and say, how many deadlines, maybe take a guess. How many deadlines do you think there are even before going through the document? So plot those on there. All right. So I'm going to make that a homework note because, again, I can't go through the contract with you, but that is going to be an important piece here. All right. It's going to be a very, very important piece. All right. So what we should kind of look like through this, right, on your timeline is a little example. If your contract has an inspection period end, right, maybe because in St. Louis area, we call it a resolution deadline. All right. So that would be somewhere in between contract acceptance and closing, right? Now, here's going to be the challenge, right? If you filled out that sample contract with actual deadlines, it's going to make it easier, right? If you got a blank contract, there's not going to be any dates on it, right? So again, think through, okay, typically what is the timeline that these things occur? All right. So just be aware of that. Now, so yeah, we'll just leave that at there. Okay. So again, take that sample contract, fill in in the homework assignment here, fill in those practice sample deadlines and put them on the timeline here. All right. So what we're going to move through now is we're going to brainstorm a little bit. on all the other people working on this transaction. All right, we know the buyer, right? The seller, the buyer's agent, if that's you, or the seller's agent, right? Or if you're the listing agent. So we're going to all write them down. We're going to write them down there, right? And think through who else is involved in completing this transaction. Now, again, this could be the sample transaction you're thinking through. Maybe you've got a deal in process right now you can think through, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to take our first break here for 3 minutes. And we're going to write down as many people as you can think of. Think of all the potential transactions. Maybe think through your familiarity of the sales contract. Who could be your partner and need to have responsibilities in helping you, the agent, and of course, the clients get to the closing table. We're going to take 3 minutes and write all those down, and then we'll share those. I got some ideas here too. We'll share them after we get back. All right, welcome back. Now, again, getting back to this question, who is involved in the transaction, right? So hopefully you got some good ideas here. Here's some ones that come to mind for us, and that one for myself, written a few down here, and also some recommended by the material here. Co-op agent, right? I mean, that's one that's a given that would hopefully first come to mind. Oftentimes, if it's not a cash offer, there's going to be a lender, right? Of course, there's a lender involved, and that's a finance deal. There's going to be an appraiser, right? Also, if there's a deadline to make sure that the property is insured, there's going to be an insurance agent that's also a part of that. If we're getting into inspections, there's going to be an inspector. If there's any work to be done, there's going to be contractors to get that work complete, right? Well, maybe one here that is all if you haven't experienced this yet, it will be a reality. Other family members for your clients, right? For your buyer, for your seller, buyers, sellers, they're family members, right? That are wanting to make sure they're taken care of in the transaction. They'll be there. And you get to help them too. All right. So we're moving on here, right? So now that you got a full list of some ideas of participants there, all right? We're going to move on into well, take a side point here. I want to go too fast here. As we're talking about people involved in the transaction, right? You might want to write in small pieces on the timeline there of, hey, when would they actually, based on your timeline and sales contract, who below your timeline, we're talking about that middle timeline on your guide there, and you've got the inspection times, right? If I'm going back, just again, make sure we're on the same spot here. If we're going back to that timeline, maybe underneath those dates there, you put who's possibly involved as a partner, right? Getting very visual there. Okay. Now we got a full list of participants there, right? We're gonna, you've identified those that would work with a buyer or seller. All right, we're gonna start filling out the buyer timeline in your participant guide. All right. So this is going to be the timeline, the line above the actual middle one as we took through the sales contract, right? So here's the one that's above is going to be the one we're going to be referencing here for timelines for the buyers. Okay. So we're going to write down the buyer timeline above that. So make sure you label buyer. That's a key piece here, right? And so here, this is going to be your to-do list to meet those deadlines, right? Including the documents and all those people that are involved, right? So feel free to use abbreviations, all right, as it might get a little cramped in here, right? And again, this is going to be market dependent. So we may only be able to fill out part of this, have conversations, go to your broker corner, broker class, right? If there's a transaction coordinator that has a class or someone to reference there, they can absolutely help out with this, right? Okay, so some things that we can think through here. An example of several to-dos that kind of would influence each other, right? And leading up to a deadline is an inspection, right? So the buyer's agent sends a list of inspectors, right? And of course, the client chooses one, right? That's always a best recommendation, by the way. If you haven't heard that throughout this Ignite, right? It's always good to give options, a few options for the buyer or your client or your seller to choose a contractor, to choose a partner. So it's not just one. You're still giving them the choice. And the reason being, maybe it's not obvious, yet giving them choice, right? And even recommend, say, hey, if you're not comfortable with these choices, these are ones that I've worked with and had great success in the past and served my clients well. Feel free to use your own, but I'd also like to get to know them as we're working together. It's always good to offer options. In case anything goes wrong, they can't point to you and say, hey, this is the person or the business that you chose me to work with. Right? Could communicate that you are liable for whatever outcome that would be less than desirable for them. Okay, so they choose their inspector, right? So then you, as a buyer's agent, you schedule the inspection, you inform the listing agent. Where would that happen? Where would that happen on the timeline, right? So you should ensure, right, to add the responsible partners for these important pieces, these important markers, and potential due date. Right. So on the screen here, you're going to see some questions to think through and adding your spots on the timeline here. What's the first thing that your buyer needs? What do the buyers need to know and do? What do you need? You as the agent, what do I need to do? And what do I need to know? Right, what's the rest of the team, co-op agents, inspectors, lenders, what do they need to do? What do they need to take action on and when? Right? Here's one that's not listed on here. Where's the transaction most vulnerable? That's highest possible tension or breaking point. Right? And what are you doing at each point to bulletproof the transaction? Great questions here. So here's an example. Again, this is not a hard, fast timeline to use, okay? But just as an example, if it fits in your market, all right, verify it with your broker, verify it with best practices within your office, right? But in this one, say it's under contract, All right. Then we got an inspector list of the buyer as the buyer's agent. Then the earnest money is due. Next, inform the listing agent of an inspection schedule. Next, actually hold the inspections. Who all needs to know about that? Send the inspection response. Okay, we had our inspections. Here's what our response is. Then the appraisal due, final walkthrough, right? That's very general timelines. I'd say most of the part that would fit most of our markets. So hopefully seeing this, feel free to take a screenshot. Probably get rid of my little mark down there. There you go. Feel free to take a screenshot of this for an example of answering all those important questions that we had on the slide beforehand. All right, so let's continue to kind of flesh out this buyer timeline by thinking through some items that we just potentially plotted there. All right, so we know our deadlines. We also know what's being done to meet those deadlines and who's involved. Let's make sure we also have everything covered by thinking about what communication needs to happen to get these things accomplished. All right, how and when will you communicate the deadlines, for example? Or you provide your clients with a timeline of the entire transaction to begin with? Again, that all important consultation in the beginning. Do you have them lined up in your app? Right? Do you happen to have those maybe in opportunities checklists? If so, yeah, how and will you get this to them? Right? Would it make sense to schedule time to go over it with them? Possibly. Not a bad idea. All right, so use those common interaction points and questions. So you got a lot of questions here on the screen, right? A lot of questions. All right, and so what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to take 5 minutes. All right, 5 minutes here, and allow you to go through these questions, to plot some more points on the screen, and maybe rework some of this, or maybe add, right? Consider this a working draft, by the way. All right, so we're going to plot some more points on a timeline. All right, so we'll give us 5 minutes here, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back there. All right, I trust that our timelines fill up pretty good, and you're getting some clarity around how these transactions can take place in a very timely and efficient, effective way. All right. This is to take the mystique, right, or that fear out of, oh, what's next? Take the pressure off of you. All right. So let's think about possible documentation that you need to represent the buyers on this buyer timeline, right? So again, continue to use a buyer timeline in your guide, right? And think through what other additional documents that you would need in this point, right? So and here, know this, right? Just put a little star or asterisk right here, right, of knowing other documents that need to come through here, because again, it's going to be different for each market. It might be a different term, right? It might even be a different number. You might want to, as you develop this and have a piece of homework, is okay. I know I need the say the amendment to the sales contract could be a possibility after inspections or after appraisals. Putting the exact document number or code, whatever might be in your market, could also be helpful there as you're learning this. All right, but in that, know that there's some additional pieces on here, right, to consider with this document. So here's some questions through here, right, as you're thinking about these next items that required documents might be, right, is what is needed through this transaction is communication, or is it actually a document, right? Is it a communication or document? If you're not sure, ask your broker, right? Ask your coach, ask other folks in the market center, right? To who and from whom it's a communication or document going, all right? How's it best to get that information across, all right? Email, phone, DocuSign, right? Should you follow up with phone calls with an email telling what's all in that information? Are there any templates that are there, right, to save some effort and time? That's a big one. I'm going to say it again. Are there any templates? And once you've done it once, right, save those templates. In Keller Williams, we have Gmail. That's the free email that you can use, right? So you can easily create those templates. Save those puppies, right? You're going to write them a lot. You get a great one or you have received one, save them as templates in your email. Right. So we're, again, moving through this buyer timeline. And let's move on to the other side, the bottom portion of your timeline fill out guide there. All right, so we're going to move to the seller. And so there's many people that you're responsible for bringing into the transaction on the seller side as well. All right, so we're not going to go exactly through this, but make a note here, another little asterisk. Who else would be involved in this transaction? Take a moment in your homework, say, who else should I consider in this transaction for the sellers? It could be stagers, right? It could be maybe a surveyor prior to going to market. It could be a photographer. Well, I guess we're talking about actually contract acceptance here. So maybe not a photographer after the fact, but a surveyor could absolutely be a person the person that you might need, right? Who else would be involved in this transaction for the sellers? There's definitely some contractors involved there if the items are requesting to be fixed, right? So make sure that you make a note there to adding additional people for your timeline. All right, so we're going to dig into the seller timeline and similar questions here. All right, starting to fill out this seller timeline. All right, what's the first thing my seller needs? What does my seller need to know and do? What do I need to know and do? What does the rest of the team, co-op agent, inspectors, lenders, what do they need to know? What am I going to do at each point of the transaction to make sure that I'm setting it up for a successful close? So track those on your timeline. Track those on your timeline. I'm going to switch it up here. I'm going to give you some examples, right? But also allow you to go through your contract and also through any other items that might come to mind through conversations or broker classes that you have. But here's some examples. Mark listing as pending in MLS. Right? That's a big one. May not have thought of that one. Right? Inform the seller of the inspection schedule. Send the inspection response to the seller. Schedule appraisal. Send the seller low appraisal response. Right? Review closing statements. Maybe it's also letting them be aware of the walkthrough, final walkthrough. Right? There's a lot of pieces on here. Here's some recommendations, but we're going to take a little less time as you're getting in this role here. We'll take 4 minutes this time around. So fill this out on your bottom seller timeline. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. Let's jump into it now. Again, this timeline is starting to be filled out real well. Again, providing clarity of trust as we're leaning into this. All right, so think about the points of communication here again that must happen to meet all the seller deadlines. All right. As we're thinking through those documents, what needs to be created, signed, exchanged, right? Make note of that on the timeline. What documents are actually going to be needed for this? You can always come back and move things around, right? So on the screen, again, here's some similar questions that we have here, all right? Again, what are the communication deadlines? What are actually contracts that you need to send documentation through, right? Which is which? How can I have some templates to save some time? To whom is this document going or communication going through? How do I send it out best? Put those on a seller timeline as well. And just like we did on the buyer side, going back, this important piece here, all those questions are kind of repeated there. But just as a point here, maybe you want to take a screenshot, make sure that you know the when, the where, the how, the who, the what. All right, put them on the timeline. Allow that to kind of be your drafting out. All right, so we're going to move away from this timeline here and move on to opportunities. And just as a note, right, you had to know it was coming from the tech trainer, right? No surprise here. And yet this is one of my favorite things to share. And this is no lie. Like in command, right, we have the opportunity to automate with keeping up with some of these timelines. All right, so in opportunities, you have the opportunity to lay out a checklist of the transaction through the opportunity phases and stages. All right, so this isn't a command training class. This is important, right? You have the opportunity to go to your MCTT or go to answers.kbd.com. All right, you can type in customize opportunities or opportunity timelines. Right, it's going to be there, and it's easy step by step. You will be amazed at the structure and the system that you can take this timeline and put it in the command, and it's there for every single transaction. You don't have to recreate. I mean, I equate it just to going to the photocopier. If you got your, if you were to have your list of all the things that have to happen to buyer or seller transaction, you just copy them again and again and again. With the same process, once those timelines are in opportunities, every time you create a new opportunity, say for a listing, that listing checklist is going to be there every single time. You can bank on it. Cool thing is you can actually put due dates for them, and you can send automatic emails to your clients once that action item is done. Really cool stuff. So check it out there. All right. We're going to kind of move along here. I want to make sure we are on the right spot. Bear with me here. Yes. Okay. We are. I want to make sure I'm on the agenda right. Moving the best practices and risk avoidance. Important piece here. Very, very important piece here. All right. So just as a note here, right, as I said before, not all deals go to the closing table, right? Once something is under contract, things fall through. You have mutual releases, right? That's what we call them in St. Louis, right? For us, share one that we had within my team here in St. Louis for a bit, right? The deal that actually fell through was based on financing, right? The buyer, when we had vetted of course, one of our practices for us, maybe something good to put on your timeline. If we have the listing, it's part of our procedures to call up the lender of the buyer, right? To vet them to make sure they are aware who this client is and their purchase power, their true purchase power, and hear it from them. If they don't call us, we're calling them. Right, so we, doing that due diligence, and yet still, the buyer had some life circumstances come up, and those the ability for them to fund that loan based on some financial changes a couple of weeks prior. I've got to get the details. I don't think that'd be appropriate. Yet it fell through. And those things happen, right? And we felt like we had high communication, but it still fell through a little bit. So from that, what did we learn? Well, we learned to temper expectations or always communicate to the client, hey, we're going to be on top of our communication. We're going to make sure that everybody knows what is going to happen when, and yet everything that we can control, we're going to control. And yet there's still some things that are out of our control that every now and then that do occur, right? So be aware of that. All right, so let's move into risk avoidance here. All right, because when you've gotten to this point in the transaction, you got the lead, you're following up, are you either showing homes or receiving showings as a listing agent? You've worked a lot, worked your tail off, right? So from that, do yourself well, right? You should avoid risk. So by acting and anticipating any potential issues that could arise, right? So here's some best practices, right? Communicate clearly and often. Communicate to everybody and involved in every step of the transaction, right? Copy any assistants, right? Even you have a set, should I let this person know about this? Yes, the answer is yes. Just do it, right? Unless it's a breach of confidentiality that doesn't put your client as a disadvantage, communicate it. Set the expectations up front. Second point there, right? Do you need the inspection response the next day? If so, be sure you communicated that when you schedule it out, right? Don't assume that people know on the other side exactly what you're thinking and how it should happen. Over communicate, under assume. All right. So also stay professional while others don't. Maintain your professionalism. A person yelling at you does not mean that you have to yell. Right. So the best way to control a situation like that is just lower your voice, be calm, be silent. Right. Maintain your professionalism. All right. So timeliness in this, communication, professionalism, these are all going to be your greatest tools to succeed in the business. Right. This isn't just in the transaction through the under contract portions here. Right. It's going to be through all out. And getting back to that fiduciary word, right? This is how you're living it out. Also, with risk avoidance, it's good to be proactive, right? Very, very good to be proactive, right? So in your guide, right, you will have some questions here. I want to make sure that we are on the right spot, right? So you've got, make sure we're right here. I do want to make sure we're on the right page. Yes, we are on page 19.7 of your instructor's guide. We'll make sure we're on the right spot there. Okay. So turn to that page. All right. And you can use your timeline for this, but we want you to think through and write down strategies you can use to help keep the deal together. All right. So we're not going to take a break for this, but think this through, right? As we're going through these questions and participant guide, refer to your timelines. You might come up with some other great options. Would love to hear what you got in the comments below, either on Facebook or YouTube. All right. But part A here, where is the deal at risk of falling apart? I asked that before. You might not know, right? So a chance to revisit that, look at the timeline. Here's some thoughts, right? Generally speaking, maybe a late deposit for earnest money, right? Maybe during a renegotiation. After a home inspection, that's like kind of the tedious spot, right? Things that might arise, or maybe People get fearful and nervous, and they're going to really have their eyes open for anything that could be wrong. Right? After an appraisal, right? Maybe it comes in low. Or maybe during the lender approval process, like what we dealt with in our team. Okay. Some options there. Also, think through potential responses for what are best practices to keep the deal alive. Second question there. Feel free to write anything that comes to mind. Yeah, here's some options here. Pricing the home reasonably to begin with, right? Whether it's on your listing or in the offer, makes things a little easier, right? Maintaining a good relationship with your co-agent, right? The better foot you get started off on, that's going to help in any negotiations, renegotiations, be more likely to succeed. Set yourself up for success, your client up for success. Also, accurately setting your client's expectations about this process and the costs that are associated in the beginning. Start from the beginning, right? The more you can front load with them, right? And then remind them throughout the process, you're going to set the expectations where it's not alarming for them, right? Of course, communicating quickly and effectively about any issues that pop up, right? Don't fear what somebody else might respond to. You're going to delay the inevitable. Just let them know. Pick up the phone. All right. Not everything should be handled in text. It's much, much more powerful in phone. You can communicate, easily convey your passion, your service through a call that a text might otherwise seem cold and unimpassioned. Right? Okay. All right. So we're going to also visit here. I'll go to the next slide here. There we go. Be the fiduciary. All right. Being the fiduciary. Of course, always act in your client's own interests. Live out the Y4C2Ts. No surprise there. All right. No surprise. We're going to live out the Y4C2Ts. All right. No deal's worth your reputation. No amount of commission, no amount of profit's worth your reputation. Right. You'll have some higher price points, and there might be a little small voice saying, hey, it's all right. Maybe you can just not mention this or not mention that because it's not really going to make a difference anyways. No, don't listen to that. Live out the Y4C2Ts. Okay. All right. So we're going to move through here. I'm really excited about this next section here. Let me make sure that we're keyed up here right. Yeah. Okay. On the timeline. Here we go. Referrals and reviews. This is an important one, y'all. Right? Because we kind of through the transaction here. All right. We're going to kind of walk through what brings in more business. All right. How can you lead generate in the midst of checking off boxes and communicating in timelines and managing all that? All right. Well, you can do it by leveraging some reviews and referrals. All right. So we've already covered that all business, right? All business that is new, it's either new, repeat, or referral business, right? So clients that feel like their experience with you was effortless, or they're very clear, and it was special, right? They're more likely to come back to you, right? That's where that repeat business comes from, of course. Yet they're also more likely to refer you to others. And of course, write reviews. Write reviews. It's going to help you generate more leads. Google, other search engines out there, they're a thing. They like seeing the reviews, like see how many stars you got, how many of those actual reviews there are. All right, so let's talk about how you can turn today's transaction, right? That kind of tedious stuff and actually tomorrow's business. Number one thing you can do. All right, so Command does, the side note here, right? Command does have some touch programs you can leverage after the transactions, post-close follow-up plans. Recommend searching that in Smart Plans, make it really easy here. Look for plans that live out these kind of staples of asking for referrals. All right. Here we go. So add every conversation. That's an important piece, right? And the most important in this practice for referrals can't be said enough, just to ask, right? Offer value, of course, but don't forget to ask. Ask at every conversation. Absolutely nothing wrong if you have a powerful, energetic, enthusiastic buyer's consultation, right? It's okay to ask for a referral there. It's okay, right? You've already provided them value. If they're feeling good and working with you, that means something to them. Promise you that. they'll be likely to give you a referral right then and there. All right. So also here throughout the transactions, of course, and of course at the close of every transaction, it's an important piece here. So there's some conversations here that you'll also see in your participant guide. Make sure that we're on here, right? On page 19.8, your participant guide. You've got a lot of scripts there, right? You've got a lot of scripts. Some are just plain and out there. Look at the second one right there, right? I'd appreciate the opportunity to help your friends and family members buy and sell their homes. Pretty straightforward, but it can be just as simple as that. It really can be, right? I do like the first one. I'll say, right, creating a clarity of, hey, business just happen. My business relies on referrals, right? So if you know anybody that is looking to buy or sell, I'd be so grateful, right? Of course, the last one's one to point out here, right? It may well make ensuring that it's on yours. Yeah, I'm gonna offer you an amazing service to refer me to your friends and family. And if you don't, I'm gonna feel like I did something wrong, and would need to talk to you about it to make sure I know how to do it better. Right? And I feel like that would just be, as I want to provide great service, right? That would be fair. All right, some great little pieces there. All right, so we asked for those referrals there. And we're moving on through the timeline there, right? Asking for referrals at every single point. Put them as checklists and the opportunities for command, right? Don't miss that part. All right. So now we're on to the post-close follow-up, an important piece here, right? A very important piece. I already kind of mentioned this a bit. Right? It's all about staying in relationship with your clients. After you get them to the closing table, it's about staying in relationship with them. Right? So you want to develop, right? Maybe a short-term, maybe more intensive month SMART plan with them where you're checking in every week, right? Or maybe it's every 3 or 4 days for the first couple of weeks, and then once a week after that, after the first 6 weeks, whatever it is, maybe a more intensive plan, and make sure they're taken care of. All right. Again, to ask for more referrals, it's great, but then put them in ultimately on the 36 touch plan. 36 touch, right? We talked about this in previous sessions. A lot of them are easily done through SMART plans, no problem, right? And here's the thing to realize, right? I know we kind of gone through a lot, but just think you've given them a great buying and selling experience. Right? These are the people who are most likely to offer you referrals of friends and family, right? So if you have a touch plan in place that mentions that through quarterly calls, through emails, right? Who do you know is awesome like you that I could also work with somebody awesome like me, right? Let's connect to awesomeness together. Right? So put your buyer, here's the thought here. Put yourself in the buyer's shoes for just a second, right? Buyer client ears, right? Because this will be helpful in thinking through the touch plan. You might even be able to have a touch plan that would be a little bit more prescriptive, right? A little customized here. What would you find helpful in the first year of owning a new home, right? First-time home buyers, right? And what would you like to get as a first-time home buyer? Think back, way back, first time you owned a home. What would you like to get as an agent? Maintenance tips, probably. Home hacks, right? Maybe some easy meals to make. Who knows, right? I remember the first time that we moved into our home. It was a little 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, cute little house way out in the country. What it would have been really, really great for us to know when we first moved in would have been to insulate the pipes. Insulate the pipes a little bit more than we had. Had a great inspector, really found some great things. There's a couple of pipes that were exposed, and we had a cold spell when the pipes busted. Now, granted, it was like year 2 of our home ownership. You had a simple reach out like that would have been really, really helpful. And we had pipes busted and then flooded. It was just a crawl space. It wasn't down in the basement or anything. And yet, it would have been handy to know, right? Just think about the first time you were a home buyer, or right, maybe it's a second home, right? Maybe just help somebody buy a second home or investment home. Right? A lot of good touches you can bring into there. Okay. Ask yourself, what would bring value to their life and their ownership? Could be a housewarming gift. Here's some other ideas. Housewarming gift. Any documents to help with taxes a year later, that's always great, or maybe a couple of months before tax season, or maybe January 1st. I think it's usually a good time, that first week of January, to give some tax documents. That's always a good idea. Referrals to contractors. Oh my goodness. And this, the year of the great, well, I guess we're started in 2021, but 2022 is continuing to see the great resignation, man. We need good people that are ready to work. Referrals for contractors. People will show up in a timely way, and they're in high demand. That's a premium right now. All right, other people, introduction to dentists, gyms, mechanics, whoever it is, right? Of course, just picking up the phone too, calling them, at least on a quarterly basis. All right. So another question here while we're sticking on this post-close fall plan, right? So we know NAR stats tell us 7 to 10 years that people are going to make a real estate decision, right? So how about in 6 to 7 years after they buy, how might your touches be a little bit different? Right? 6 to 7 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 5 years. Maybe you want to begin and labeling them in a database. I always like this idea in Command, right? Because you've got system tags in there, say sold and bought, right? Sold and bought. Those are system tags that they're gray. You can see any label on there. I like adding an additional tag, a customized tag, make it whatever color you want. That is sold 2022, bought 2022. That way I know once 2027 comes around, crazy to think about, but I hope you intend to be in the business that long. It comes around, you can have a more purposeful plan for those folks to reach out. We're talking about equity, start talking maybe about refinance, talking about second homes, whatever it is, right? It could be the value of their home, right? Getting to know their dreams, using the forward conversation we already used, like bring that out, right? Maybe they intend to retire, maybe just have a getaway place, right? How would those plans change? Here's another idea. All right, as you continue to stay in touch, so say a seller moves away from your area. They move away. You can't help them as an agent as far as being their fiduciary because they're no longer with you, right? Should you take them off a touch plan? No, don't do that. No. What would you stay in touch with them about? Again, you can still celebrate them with birthdays, call them on the birthday, text them on the birthday, still give them the tax documents after they move, right? But still give them updates in the neighborhood and areas that they're going to. You want to stay in touch with them because you have referrals, right? Just as you're treating others how to treat you with referrals, still treat them how to give you more referrals, right? They're going to transact wherever they're moving to. Help them find that next great agent so they don't get stuck with a weak agent at a weak moment, right? Or any other friends or colleagues they interact with. Right, you're still being someone who cares for them, and by I always like to say, and I don't have a formal plan around this, but there are what I like to call from these 6 core competencies. I always say at least there's 6 kind of check marks I vet agents for to make sure that they're great agents. You can just simply use those 6 core competencies. So again, if somebody moves away, say, hey, if you ever need an agent, right? I help other people that have moved away. Always find that great next agent. I got a 6-step process and make sure that they're going to serve you well. So I want to be able to do that for you. That's how I run my business. I want to make sure they do the same for you wherever you move. Easy touch. Right. All right, here, another piece. It's not just with our clients that we could follow up with. It's also co-agent follow-up. This is a great opportunity here. All right, so of course, not just to stay in contact with your clients, right? What would be the benefits of continuing a relationship with that co-agent? Right? With that co-agent. One, you could possibly have the ability to have some early info, even if just friending them on Facebook, right? About any new listings in a certain neighborhood they have, right? Nothing wrong with a touch plan on a monthly basis. Hey, who do you happen to know that's looking to move this area? Or do you have any other people that would say they would move or they would make this decision if they had a buyer? Who knows? You can make that connection. You can also learn from a more experienced agent. Doesn't just have to be within our walls. There's amazing agents everywhere, right? Also getting referrals. Maybe it's a certain area that you're not willing to work, but they are, or vice versa. Then, of course, and we've talked about this before, as your Keller Williams and us being the premier real estate training company, right, and coaching company, there's opportunity to build your downline, to bring other KW family members in. Those allow them to see their business grow. Right? Be a service to them there. Okay. Okay. So we're going to keep moving here. So here's some ideas. Well, I guess we'll stay on the same slide, but some ideas for good ways to follow up with a co-op agent here. Of course, send a handwritten note, thank you card, post it on Facebook. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you're going to send them a note, all right, you're going to do that in private, why not tag the other agent and just celebrate them? I don't think we celebrate the other side enough publicly. Right? I think that's a great idea. Maybe something to consider. Maybe send them a book. Help them build the MREA if they don't already have it. That's a great one. If you find out that they're interested in investing, Millionaire Real Estate Investor, it's a phenomenal book. The One Thing, Shift, any of those books would be great. Right? Of course, share any other information as you learn what's important to them. Maybe be specific in that. All right. So we kind of gone through a lot here today. All right. And I'm going to make sure that we wrap up on this last slide. Here on our timeline, we got some recaps and ahas. All right. So we're going to write down all your ahas. Ask yourself this question: how has your thinking changed about this? I hope you found some clarity and a little bit more ease about stepping into these transactions. Hopefully, knowing that all of us have different learning styles, maybe seeing the transaction on a timeline is helpful. Maybe it wasn't enough of a timeline. Maybe you need to tape two papers together and make a larger timeline and map it all out and put it in command. All right, but how's your thinking changed? What's your mindset now around this? All right, what ideas or mindsets were created new? All right, how do you feel differently about these transactions? Hope you're encouraged. All right, hope you're encouraged. Also, what behaviors are going to be different now that you have this? What will you do with it? All right, what actions will you take? Hopefully, you've learned some tools and models here along the way. All right. So on this, it's that time after you have those ahas, the success system. You have the opportunity to find that next person that you get to work and serve really well with, to get them under contract, to be able to live some of these pieces out. All right. So we're going to move into the success system if you're in the market center, with your peers, with your facilitator there. We're going to jump in the role play, make some awesome calls, make some connections together to see who needs help, your help, who needs it. Of course, also write those note cards, put the 10 in the database, the daily 10-5-1 with social media, all that good stuff to get business, getting in action. All right. So we're going to hand that over. Again, if you're not in the market center, still opportunity to do this. All right. Seize the moment. Role play, call somebody up and role play, and then make some calls. Do the daily success system for you. Okay. Now we have just one session left, right? Just one session left of Ignite. Let me turn this one off here. We're going to wrap up. It's been kind of crazy to think we're only going through here, but we'll be wrapped up just before the July 4th holiday. So keep leaning in. Would love to still hear your successes. All right. We've been on this journey a lot. And if this has been beneficial, if it has helped you get more business or learn more skills to get more business, we'd love to learn that. We'd love to highlight it. All right. I'd love to be able to connect with some people and post Ignite, share some of these success stories. Spur us on there. Be awesome to hear. Anyways, trust was good. Reach out if you have any questions. Go ignite your career. Go ignite your clients. Get them to where they need to go. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.